Thursday afternoon to you. Welcome to the Jon Sanchez Show on Newstalk 780 KOH. It's a pleasure to be with you and a pleasure to be with my co-hosts. Let's go around the horn and make the introductions. Mr. Dwight Millard on Q Home Loans. How are you, my friend?
I'm fantastic, John. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Anxious for it to be Friday, I'll be honest with you. As we were all kind of discussing off air. Yeah, exactly. Aaron Clark of Edge Realty. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great. Good.
Good.
I can't wait for the weekend too.
I hear you.
Just so I don't have to hear anybody complain about the market or rates or bonds anymore.
Right.
Because they're just yo-yoing everywhere.
This is true. I know that makes for a nice weekend when you don't get those phone calls. That's for sure. Right, Dwight? You know better than anybody.
Amen.
Of course, I don't know if that's really true because you answer your phone 24/7, so to take care of your clients. So yeah, I don't know if that really is the case with you.
It's
All right, fellas. Well, let's get down to business. Let's tell you what we have lined up for you. Going to go through today's stock market recap. A little bit of a weak session here, but we did get some news after hours not long ago, as always. It seems to happen right before the show. President said Lebanon and Israel have extended their ceasefire by about 3 weeks, so we'll see if that has much of an impact tomorrow. Of course, in the market. Let me see. We're don't even have a quote quite yet on the pre-market because it just started trading the after hours, I should say. So we will keep an eye on that one for you in the after hours. But let me tell you what we have lined up after the stock market recap. Buying your first rental property is completely, and I mean completely different than when you buy your primary home. Right? Most people don't realize it until it's too late. Well, today what we're going to be doing with the boys is we're going to be breaking down the key differences of how you qualify with Dwight, what Dwight as a lender is looking for, and in Aaron's world, what makes a property a winner? Because remember, I love this saying, you don't buy a rental with your heart, you buy it with the math. How'd you like that saying that I came up with, Aaron?
I love
pretty
it.
good, wasn't it?
It's very true. Yeah.
I was going to say, true or not?
Absolutely. It's all about the numbers.
Yeah. It's all about the numbers, exactly. I think a lot of you, of course, are contemplating maybe getting into your first rental this year. Obviously, you want to see maybe where rates are, et cetera. But this could be a great time if we start to see rates coming down and things stabilize in bottom line after this, Iran conflict / war gets behind us, which hopefully will be soon, but who knows? But you need to really understand, again, this big difference, right, Aaron? You see this a lot. And every time, we bring up this subject, I think of an analogy Corey said years ago where you're not walking into a rental visualizing, what the couch is going to look like over in this portion. Or better yet, the smell of freshly baked cookies in the oven, right? This is all about the math. And all three of us can share stories with friends, clients, etc., that they don't look at it that way. They'll go in and they'll go, it's like they visualize in their mind, this is where I'm going to live. The Christmas tree will be over here. No, wait a minute here. This is a rental. But yet they still proceed to go forward because they want to be nice people. And they do all these unnecessary upgrades and things like that, thinking they're going to recoup that in higher rents. And as all of us know, that usually is not the case. So it's really hard, especially and that's why I wanted to focus in on the new buyer. It's really hard, Aaron and Dwight, to convince them you have to look at these properties completely different. And again, Dwight's going to enlighten us on the lending side because, again, completely different world there.
Yeah, I always try to help people understand that you want to look for a property that a tenant can't destroy. Where a leak can't happen.
Good way to look at it.
It's like, well, I want the tile and I want the pretty fixtures and all that. No, you want something bulletproof that when they don't close the curtain all the way.
Stainless steel everywhere.
Yeah, the floor isn't rotted a year later.
Concrete floors.
Yeah, exactly.
Dwight, what about your world? What are you going to tease us on here?
Well, I think it's easier than most people think. I think if you have a vision and you have a plan, you can make this happen, especially if you're looking at your first one. That's where everybody had to start. That's where all of us had to start. Everybody's got to start somewhere. So it's a good topic for people to pay attention to.
A quick question to both of you. I'll start with you, Dwight. How do you convince someone to overcome the fear of buying that first rental? Because it's scary enough when you buy your primary home, but at least you're going to live there, right? You're not relying upon somebody else to make the mortgage payment, et cetera. How do you play that psychological game with people?
Well, I think I try to be reasonable and I share my own testimonies. You can hear nightmares out there, but the reality is I think what they think is oh, the hot water heater out at 2 a.m. That's what they think.
Right.
And, it does happen, but, it's
not frequent.
Yeah, exactly. So I think you just I share with them my own experiences and things like that. And I think that kind of helps a little bit to understand.
Okay, perfect. How about you, Aaron, as the realtor?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. It's like people take the worst case scenario and then extrapolate it over every experience. And it's like, there's a lot of really good opportunity out there and ways to move ahead where even when you're scared, as long as you see the numbers, you see the potential, you see what the basis outcome is. And the fact is, in most cases, if you buy well, I think we talked about this last week in one of our shows, it's about the purchase, right? It's about the
Yes,
buying price. It's not about the selling price. If you get into it in such a good way, then even if a year or two goes by and you decide, it's just not for me, you can get out with relatively no consequence and maybe even still put some money in your pocket. So
sure,
just
sure.
finding that
That's a
right
good.
one to cut your teeth with is the critical perspective if it's something that you're having a hard time grasping or understanding what it would be like.
And this is one thing Aaron's going to cover for us is again finding that right one, because when we buy our primary home, there's a lot of things we look at, right? We again back to the visualization where the Christmas tree is going to be in the living room and the family sitting around the fireplace drinking hot chocolate with the snow coming down outside and so on and so forth. Schools, if you have children, that type of thing. But Aaron, when it comes to the rental property, though, it's sure you want to consider things like schools but the bottom line is you have to really, and this is where your expertise as the realtor comes into play. You've got to look and see what are those amenities that house is going to offer. Let's say there's no structural issues or whatever. It's maybe put a little paint, some carpet, and you're ready to go and get it on the rental market. But there's other things that you need to be looking at as the landlord, as the owner of that home, that again you don't look at when you're looking at your primary home.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to remember that your tenants are going to be there for a short time period. So you want to pick a place where they're going to be close to the freeway, still have good schools, things like that. And then from a landlord perspective, you want to find something that, again, you're going to have durability, where you're not going to have a lot of issues. So a lot of my clients, even though it costs a little bit more, they want to be in something that has an HOA. So they like condos and townhomes as investments.
That's
Yeah, because
interesting.
they don't really have to maintain anything other than the interior issues. They don't have to worry about the roof. They don't have to worry about the paint. They don't have to worry about landscape, things like that.
Mhm.
So all of that will be critical to whatever the goal is and how involved you want to be. Do you want to hire a property manager? You want to self manage? All these things
Right.
are things to take into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Jen, I think too is what you probably would never live in as a primary residence can sometimes be the best investment property. To Aaron's point,
What do you
access
mean
to
by
the
that?
freeway, access to the
Okay.
freeways,
Okay.
things where you might want to be as an individual in a cul-de-sac,
Mm-hmm.
Pleasantville or whatever. But I
Right.
mean, when you got a tenant, typically that they may even be working graveyards at the casino. I mean, there's just all
Right.
sorts of things. So I mean, yeah, what you may not personally take down as and I
Yeah.
think that's the way you got to go
That's the
into
point.
it. You got to
Yes.
go into it that way because it may make more sense as an investment property for a tenant, and some of them can be some of the best.
I got to get this question up before I forget, and then I'll get to the stock market side. Aaron, this is a question for you. Do you try to pick a demographic when you're especially on your first property where you don't want to screw up? Do you try to pick a renter demographic like, hey, I want to target the millennials or I want to target retirees or that type of thing?
Not too much. It's more about where you're going to get most profit. So maybe to some extent when you're looking at somebody who's trying to avoid having any sort of vacancy and they're going to focus on being by the university because you're going to get
Right.
a influx of families and college students
Mm-hmm.
and everything in between. But overall, it's really just about what the price is, what the numbers are. That's it.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I've never thought about that. Yeah, targeting the demographic side of it. So that's interesting. All right, boys. So let's get down. Got a couple minutes before we have to go to break. So let me get the stock market out of the way here because it was not a very exciting session whatsoever. Unfortunately, it was a down session. Yesterday, of course, was a great day, another record-setting day for the Nasdaq and the S&P. But man, today we just could not get any momentum whatsoever. We didn't really have any negative news, but I'm telling you guys, I'm going to go back to what I'd said a few weeks ago before we ran up, and we did hit a bottom. So I was correct in my assumption, and I'm starting to feel it again. The bones are starting to ache a little bit, as the saying goes. We're starting to weaken on some internals of this market, especially you look at the software names like ServiceNow and a few others that this week have reported earnings numbers that were way off of Wall Street's expectation. You got to watch this sector because it's very important to the overall health of the market. So you add that to the uncertainty 2 ships seized by Iran yesterday. The whole mess that's still going on there today. Trump is falling in the polls. America is very upset at him. They're tired of the high energy prices. So his ratings are going down. So that has people concerned that we Republicans may not do well in the midterm elections. So we've got a lot of factors now that are starting to come around because of the extent of this war that is going on. And so I'm starting to see and visualize with some of the internals, et cetera, that we really could be on the cusp of a pullback. I don't like when we just continue to set record after record after record like we've done so far here in the last 2 to 3 weeks. It makes me very nervous. I've said that many times. I would rather have a market that's kind of flat or even one that goes down and then up for a bit. But where you just go up day after day after day, that's a market that is very prime for any type of negative news for the profit taking to come in. So just be cautious at this point. I'm going to go back to from my bullish comments and feeling to, I want you to be cautious with your money at this point and just watch things very closely because, as we all know, we're one true social post away from this market rallying or one true social post away from this market falling and bringing things down. I also don't like what I've been seeing these last couple of days where oil's been edging up a little bit. Even though the market's not paying much of attention to it, it is something that eventually will catch up to the market. There's no doubt in my mind about that. So we finished with a loss of 180 on the Dow, 0.36%, closed at 49,310. NASDAQ gave up 219 points, 0.89%. S&P down 30.41%. We'll come back, touch on the oil prices, gold, and of course my favorite, which is Dwight's analysis of what's going on in the bond and the mortgage market. We'll be right back. Let's turn it over to Kristen Snow, Right Now Traffic Center. Hello, Kristen. Welcome back to the Jon Sanchez Show on News Talk 780 KOH with Aaron Clark of Edge Realty and Dwight Millard of OnQ Home Loans. All right, once again, we finished down to 180 on the Dow. The NASDAQ gave up 219, S&P lower by 30. We're going to get to our topic here in a moment. Don't buy a rental with your heart. Buy it with the math. Oh, it's going to be a good one. First, let's hit the commodities and the mortgage side of things. Oil for the day up $2.75, 95.76 a barrel. Gold lost $30.80, closing at $4,727 an ounce. 3 basis point increase, Mr. Millard, on the 10-year. 432 is our close. Take us into the world of mortgages, my friend.
Yeah, John, I think we dodged a little bullet today in this market, even though according to Mortgage News Daily, we were flat at 6 points from the 30-year. The mortgage-backed securities started out positive, and I think they finished up or down worse. Mm-hmm. I think it was down 13. We were up 9, so it's a 22-point swing. Mm-hmm. John, I mean, that's we got repriced. Everybody got repriced. So, but I think if we, for now, could just stay in this 6.3 window, maybe 6.25, it's not where we wanted to be, but it's okay. Your governments in your 15 years are still inside of 6 in the,
Right. Are you getting many people right now, Dwight, been meaning to ask this, that are coming to you saying, should I do a rate buy down just to get in that sub 6% range?
So, John, that's an interesting question because the challenge that you have is if you pay money to do a permanent rate buy down, if you as the consumer, not a builder or a seller, but if you the consumer is paying it, it's quite a bit of money to buy down. I mean, let's just say rates today are hovering around 6.5. You want to get a 5.99, that's probably going to cost you a couple points. And then all of a sudden you close and 8 months later, rates go to 5.25. Yeah. You just wasted that money. And remember, every point, if you break it out, takes about 4 years to break even. I'm just using it. Yeah, I'm just using it.
So 8 years for 2 points. Interesting.
Yeah, so you're just to even break even, to even start to feel the benefit. Yes, you've got a lower payment, but you paid for that lower payment up front.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely psychological for sure.
Yeah,
I know. That's why I brought it up. Yep.
I am not a huge fan of paying multiple points. I mean, again,
I know you're not.
If you got a seller or builder willing to pay in it helps attack your closing costs and your rate buy down, fantastic. But again, I'm going to go back to, I think the temporary buy downs, John, are at least worth looking at because you never lose the money.
So explain that real quick.
So on for example, a 2-1 buy down, let's say, what we put in impound is 15 grand. Let's just say that's what the 2-1 buy down costs. That's the savings. Let's just say you're in it a year. So you use 7,500 of, I'm just going to keep it simple. And you decide to refinance or sell, the remaining amount goes towards your principal reduction. So you never lose the money in a temporary buy down scenario, unless you take it all the way, obviously, to the term.
And explain to the audience what the 2 and what the 1 mean.
Yeah, so you're basically buying down the first year at 2% lower than what your fully indexed rate would be 1% lower, and then you're at whatever that rate is. And typically,
So if we're at 6.5, then you're looking at a 5.5.
Well, you're looking at a 4.5. The first
What
year.
would you say about the 1%?
That'd be the second year. That's the second year. The first year, you're 2% lower, so you're 4.5.
So that's one way, right, Aaron? To get the psychological side.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, John, in the old days, we used to be able to qualify you at the start rate. Now we can't. So the buy down used to have a huge benefit when you could actually qualify at that lower. We used to do those
where
just
someone
to qualify.
wouldn't normally qualify.
Yeah.
Right.
So now they got smart. You can't. There's no qualifying at the start rate.
What's the negative of the 2-1?
If the rates really don't move by the time you get to that point in the third year, you're probably going to have a slightly elevated rate than what you could have gotten out of the gate, if they didn't move.
Yeah.
That would probably be one of the negatives. But right now, I've never been a big 2-1. I've never been a short-term temporary buy down guy, but right now it makes sense that if you think that there's a better day ahead in terms of rates, get that first year or second year.
So let's just run real quickly some math before we go to break. So let's say the 30-year national average is 6.5. You do a 2-1 buy down. Now you're at 4.5.
4.5. Mm-hmm.
Next year you're going to be at 5.5.
Correct.
And how do you determine the cost of that 2-1?
So a buy down. So let's just take 6.5 it's going to cost 2.25 points approximately. For that buy down. So now, John, you as the consumer would never pay the buy down because all you're doing is prepaying your savings. You only would use it if you have a seller builder contribution, because otherwise, if you
never call your mortgage professional and say I want a 2-1. Only
if you're paying for it,
negotiates that.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
It should be just in your incentives or whatever you're trying to get your concessions. That's where you would utilize it. Absolutely.
Because there's no good use of that money doing that if you were coming out of your own pocket.
Yeah, because all you're doing is prepaying your savings.
Right.
That's all you did.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Aaron, how often do you negotiate that a 2-1? Very often?
We do it on just about every transaction right now. It's just not necessarily directly for that. It might be closing costs. So now the buyer saves $10,000 out of their pocket towards closing costs that would normally come out of their pocket, and they can redirect that towards putting in new carpet or something like that. So it does get utilized, but it just depends on where you're going to get the most bang for the buck and where it's going to emotionally help the buyer moving forward. Because it's not always about the dollars and cents. It's sometimes, people say all the time, I know it doesn't make sense, but I want my payment at this number, and I'll pay whatever it costs to get my payment at this number because it's psychological for me. I know it doesn't make sense to pay extra to my 2.5% rate on my house, but I want to pay it off in 15 years instead of 30. I mean, it just depends on.
So every situation is different.
Yeah, every situation is different.
All right. Great advice, boys. All right, we come back. We're going to get into our topic. Don't buy a rental with your heart. Buy it with the math, right? So different buying that first rental versus buying that first home. We're going to break down the differences that Aaron's going to show us. Dwight's going to show us from a lending perspective. You don't want to miss us. Let's turn it over to Jack Saban first. He's got news, traffic, and weather. Hello, Jack. Welcome back to the Jon Sanchez Show on News Talk. Yes, it does, Aaron. Sorry, folks. You caught that. Aaron was saying, hey, you getting your cattle back again? And the beef is, I'm like, no, not this year, because there's no water and fuel prices are through the roof, and so are cattle prices. So, we were talking about how much I miss it. And I had a beautiful 65 head herd, and miss some dramatic, especially this time of year when, it starts in about February, the calving. But you're right, Aaron. And in all seriousness, that's why beef prices are just through the roof. And, and the quality, it's just terrible. It's just, no matter, it seems like where you go, the quality is just not there. Everyone's cutting corners and not finishing them correctly, and so on and so forth. So it's a challenging time. That's why you're seeing a lot of people eating chicken, which my wife says has gone up dramatically. So she's gone out and bought a bunch of chickens. So those are easy to take care of. So you gotta figure out some way to get your protein, fish or chicken, right?
Yeah.
Of course, you fed me these lamb chops for dinner the other night they were like a T-bone steak. I've never seen lamb chops. I think she got them at Costco. They were amazing, but goodness, they were thick. I've never seen something like that. And she said they're like $20 cheaper than the equivalent amount of beef, but still not beef though.
Yeah.
Welcome to my life. That's for sure. All right. Once again, let's get down to our topic today. Don't buy a rental with your heart, buy it with the math. So this is going to be really interesting for those of you that are looking to get into the real estate game, right? I always like to kind of prime the pump for many of you that are sitting on the sidelines. So Aaron, we're going to start with, sorry, Dwight, excuse me. We're going to start with you. The qualifying for the rental is not the same as qualifying for the primary home. Break us down on that.
Yeah, well, and what's good, John, is in the old days, you used to have at least 25% down. Then we went to 20. The good news today is you can get into an investment property, especially even your first one, with 15% down. And so, qualifying basically is the same as if you were going to qualify for your primary. The only factor is that we get to use, per the appraiser, whatever they put on the rent schedule, we get to use 75% of that rental income to offset your payment, which is a huge benefit to most people that are just right on the edge. So I like to say it, John, to a lot of people. It's kind of funny that is if you're getting a decent price on it, you're getting a decent rate. There's a high probability that you for qualifying that you're just going to offset the rent again with the cost. Qualifying is as if you were qualifying for your own credit scores. It's the same as anything else in the mortgage world. The higher the credit, the better interest rates you're going to get. Debt to income, we're going to follow the automated underwriting systems. So, if you get an approval, we got to keep it under 50 back-end ratio. And if you get an approval, remember, if you're buying strictly an investment property, you have to go conventional. You cannot go government unless you plan on living in it.
Right.
So, and then typically you can count the rents. Now, if there is a current lease outstanding on the property, you can actually use that as well. If it benefits you, you could use that at the 25% vacancy. And John, people go, 25% vacancy in Reno is absolutely absurd. And it is. Yes. You got a two or three.
Worst case scenario, though.
Yeah. Well, but that factors in, repairs. That factors in somebody leaving. It just, there's so much to that renter variable. Then that's the reason why. And I've actually argued before and won. I haven't lately won, but was able to say, hey, here's the rental vacancy factor in Northern Nevada. Why do we hit? And there's just other things that go into that now. So
can I break this down just a little bit? I want to go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
So the down payment. So I'm sitting there doing the math. And you said 15%, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are. Let's just use a median price, $600,000, right, Aaron? Let's say 10% would be 60,000. So what you're still looking at
90,000.
90. Where the hell do people get that kind of money for a rental? How do you overcome that?
From their investments, John.
Yeah,
right. Cash out the brokerage
from
accounts.
Yeah. Well, John, there's gifts. There's all just the way you buy your house. Maybe an inheritance, maybe something just different happened. Typically it's not through a savings, but we've talked about it. People leverage other real estate, and you've talked about this, to buy an investment property. So they do have it, and
yeah, but what about the person starting out? Guys, Aaron, come in the conversation. How do you guys find someone that can come up with that kind of money for a rental? I can understand it's like, again, back to psychological. If I'm going to move into this house, I'm going to raise my family there. I'm going to do anything I can to get into that house. But a rental where I'm going to be lucky maybe to break even, like you guys always, talk about. But to come up with that kind of cash, Aaron, let's start with you as the realtor. Where's that money coming from?
Crypto.
Okay.
Gold. Yeah. No, I'm getting more and more clients that are getting a little more savvy that, maybe they're single, they've started a career job, they're making pretty good money. And honestly, they're living at home, and their first property purchase instead of a primary residence is they are buying an investment property, or they're buying, like, we talked about this a few weeks back ago, where they're buying a 4-unit or a duplex, and they're going to live in one. So it reduces that down payment to where they can do owner occupancy at 5% or whatever. So you have a little bit of that. There's also special loan programs. Dwight's probably talked about this a couple weeks ago. I think it was the DSCR loans, where they're based basically on how much income and rent is coming in. You still have to do a larger down payment. And if you already have an investment that maybe you got one when rates were at 2.5% or 3%, and that thing's got a 25-30% equity in it now, you can leverage that equity as your down payment, or even your primary residence, you can leverage that equity. But again, it's in the buy. So you got to find something that might be sort of off the books that someone else might look at and go, oh, that's super expensive when it's on the books, but when it's off the books, you can save some cash. So finding those secret spots are
Yeah.
really key
The pocket listings and
right
things.
now.
Dwight, you know people's finances better than anybody. You're looking at the credit apps and the bank statements and the brokerage statements, et cetera. Where are you seeing these buyers coming in from getting the cash from?
Well, a lot of it, Aaron's absolutely correct. But John, you also indicated, I mean, as affordability slips away in the arena of your primary residence, so does it. The activity is further challenging. But Aaron's absolutely right. I've seen more people buy an investment property before they buy their primary property, because they're either at home, they're renting, they've got $300 rent at a friend's room. It's kind of amazing. And people, I know you probably don't see it. Well, you get the investment part of it, but they are saving a little bit more. Really, it's a kind of amazing, because I know my kids spend, you know, Caden can't even keep it in his pocket, you know, but some of these kids are actually disciplined and they're actually saving some money.
Right.
So, I mean,
Also, other locations. Reno
Yeah.
is hot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
more and more
Good
people
point.
are
That's a good
going
point,
out
Aaron.
of state,
Yeah.
out of city, out
Yeah.
of area. So
great
let's
point.
not forget that. You can buy a rental anywhere in the US.
Yep. Yep. Excellent point. Okay. And then the final point, Dwight, and then we'll move on. You brushed over the credit score side of things. So where do you want to see? Let's go minimum for those out there listening.
I would just say, if you really want, to keep this balanced 720,
Okay.
I think you get under that, it's going to start putting strain on your interest rate and your payments.
Which will make it even more
Yeah,
difficult
more
to pencil
difficult
the
to
deal.
pencil it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very good. So our takeaway here is, again, not a bad idea. Instead of buying your first primary home, if you're young, buy that rental property. Second one, make sure, I guess this could be easier also, Dwight, especially if Aaron can find you a house that already has a renter in there. How often, I don't hear much about that though. How practical or logical is that, Aaron? I mean, how often do you find a landlord selling a home to another potential landlord where you
Well,
get that
usually
built-in
what'll
tenant?
happen if it's going to be occupied, they realize they're ready to sell sometime that year, so they're not renewing
Yeah.
leases and they put them at month to month. So
Okay.
they'll be occupied, and then the person buying it then can say, let's say it's a duplex, we'll use that as an example again, and they're going to live in one of the sides. They can determine, okay, well, one side's getting $100 less a month than the other side. So as soon as I close, I'll kick that person out, give them a 30-day notice, and then I'll move into that spot because under the guidelines, they have to move in within, what is it, Dwight, 60 days or
60
something like
days.
that? Yeah,
60
for it to
days.
be still an
Okay.
owner occupancy loan.
Interesting.
So they can do that. I mean, most people aren't selling an investment property with 9 months left on a lease, because then the
Okay.
buyer has to honor the tenant's rights until the
Yes.
completion of the lease.
Right. Right. Okay.
Well, John,
Perfect.
it's hard to show a house too with a
Yeah.
Yeah,
tenant.
good point. Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. All right. We come back. We're going to come back to Aaron. He's going to educate us and inform us on the next one. What makes a good rental versus a good home? Let's wrap it up with Kristen Snow right now, Traffic Center. Kristen, welcome back to the Jon Sanchez Show on Newstalk 780 QH. Mr. Dwight Millard of On Q Home Loans. Can we get your phone number, sir?
Yes, sir.
Aaron Clark of Edge Realty, your phone number, sir.
Same area code.
Beautiful. Thank you, fellas. Okay, Aaron, back to you. What makes a good rental versus a good home?
Very interesting question. Back to what you said earlier about buying out of heart and numbers, it's kind of similar. When people are looking at primary homes, they're looking at, how updated the kitchen, the bathroom, the house is, all that kind of stuff. But as an investor, going back to what I said earlier, you want to look for that durability. You want to look for that location. Is it in an area where you're going to get high rent demand? Is it in an area that's popular versus an area that's not popular, so that you don't have that vacancy? It's really good if you can to get a rental in an area that's mostly not rentals, because that area is always going to be a high demand rental property. And this will also vary too, depending on whether or not you're doing long-term rental versus short-term. So like an STR, which is a short-term rental, like a VRBO or an Airbnb or something like that. Or if you do like one of those corporate housing type things for traveling nurses, things like that. You want to look at rentability. One bedrooms, they rent, but you don't get as much bang for the buck as you do with a 3 or a 4 or 5 bedroom, obviously. And then when you are getting something and it does need updating or improving or something like that, that you're not going in there and spending money on things that are going to easily get ruined, or you're going to have to replace.
White carpet?
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to put a $3,500 or $6,000 refrigerator in there. You might want to go down to the local refurbished used refrigerator places and buy one for $500 because you're going to replace it, Because the bottom line is the tenant is most tenants, not all tenants, are not going to treat the property as well as you are ever, because that's not in their mindset. Their mindset is, I'm a user, I'm here in this property, I'm going to use it until I don't.
How discerning is the renter right now in today's market?
What do you mean discerning for the renter?
So using your refrigerator example,
Yeah.
right? Are they going to walk in and go, "Oh, that's not a double door stainless steel refrigerator. It's
No.
But you get my point. As far as
Yeah.
you as the landlord, you want, like you said, a bulletproof home, not the fancy, but things that are going to last. Are renters right now going, no, I don't want, you know, kind of that industrial type of home. I want, again, smell the cookies in the oven, that type of thing. Or they're going, I got to take what I can get my hands on because there's not anything out there.
I mean,
That's
the
pulling from everything.
demographic in the area will definitely change that answer, but I will
Right.
tell you that if you have the renter that's going to want all the high end, high whatever stuff, you're going to lose that renter quickly, because that
Okay.
renter is somebody who's willing to spend the money, which means they're also willing to buy soon, or they're in that transitional time period. If you're looking for longevity, like the best are frankly the ones that are going to stay there for 5, 10, 15 years.
Oh yeah, I
They're
would believe
always going to
that.
pay you rent. They're not going to bug you unless there's a problem. And so for something like that, they're not going to really be too picky about anything. They're just looking at their bottom dollar as far as how much is the rent and how great of a communicator are you. And again, this is if you're self-managing, and it has the process thus far in the front end been convenient.
Hmm.
Were you easy to get a hold of when there was a problem? When the
Hmm.
refrigerator, water heater, it's like I had a tenant that called me. I was on vacation out of the country, and they said the water heater broke and flooded the garage. Like,
Mm,
I'm so sorry. I'll get this handled for you. I'll get it all taken. We did it as fast as humanly possible. And they're a long-term tenant, and they're happy to, they want to make sure you get paid on time too. So those are the
nice.
types of things that you want to look for.
Are you real quickly? Are you a big fan, Aaron and Dwight? You've been a landlord, so I'll throw this in real quick. Big fan of allowing tenants to do improvements, because there are some, especially those long-term tenants. Oh, let me do the yard. Oh, let me fix this or do that.
Yeah, I
Or is
mean,
that a
it's a
no-no?
case by case. I mean, you gotta fill out their ability. Sometimes if it's something that's non-consequential, like they want to do the yard, it's like, all right, I'll let them do the yard, and then I'll drive by and see what it looks like. And if they look like they just love it and they're into it and they're good at it, then why not give them a break on the rent and let them do it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dwight, 10
Yeah,
seconds to answer.
I agree, John. Just get an approval first from the landlord. Aaron, me, you. Just get an
Yeah.
approval first.
Okay, perfect. All righty, boys. Excellent job as always. Very fascinating topic. We will do more of that for you so you can get into that rental game when you want to. God bless everybody. Have a great week or great day. I will be back with you tomorrow. See, I was thinking it was a weekend
Yeah.
already, boys. You screwed me up. I'll see you guys next week. Take
Jon Sanchez is a registered investment advisor, and the opinions expressed by Sanchez Gaunt Capital Management LLC on this show are their own and do not reflect the opinions of News Talk 780 or its parent company, Cumulus Media. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for any individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation. Past performance is not indicative of future performance. Dwight Millard, NMLS ID number 241259, a licensed mortgage loan officer with Highlands Residential Mortgage Limited, an equal housing lender. NMLS ID number 134871. The information shared on this live broadcast is for general information purposes only and does not constitute financial or mortgage advice. Listeners should consult directly with a licensed mortgage professional for guidance tailored to their specific situation. All loans are subject to credit approval and program guidelines. Not all applicants will qualify. Loan terms and availability may vary by state and are subject to change without notice. Highlands Residential Mortgage Limited is licensed in multiple states. For a full list of state licenses and disclosures, please visit https://www.highlandsmortgage.com/licenses/. The views expressed during this program are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of Highlands Residential Mortgage Limited.